8-year-old orphan girl comforts a 4-year-old autistic boy who refuses to eat after his mom's death. His widowed millionaire father doesn't know how to cook. Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today? The November rain hammered against the windows of the upscale Seattle neighborhood as 8-year-old Emma pressed her face against the cold glass of the coffee shop. Her torn sneakers squelched against the wet pavement, and her oversized jacket, 3 sizes too big and found in a dumpster behind a thrift store, hung like a tent around her small frame. She clutched a crumpled dollar bill she'd found earlier that morning in a parking lot, enough for maybe half a muffin if she was lucky. Inside the warm cafe, she watched a man in an expensive charcoal suit sitting at a corner table, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shook with barely contained sobs. Across from him sat a little boy, maybe 4 years old, staring blankly at an untouched plate of golden pancakes dripping with syrup. The boy's dark hair was perfectly combed, his clothes pristine, a tiny button-down shirt and pressed khakis, but something about his complete stillness made Emma's heart ache with recognition. The man looked up, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and desperate, dark circles underneath, suggesting weeks without proper sleep. "Please, Tommy!" His voice cracked through the window, raw with desperation. "Just one bite, anything, please, son. Mommy would want you to eat. She'd be so worried about you getting thin like this." The little boy didn't respond. He sat motionless as a statue, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, staring through the food as if it didn't exist in his world. Emma watched the man's shoulders shake as he fought back tears that threatened to spill over again. She'd seen that kind of pain before, the hollow, crushing emptiness that comes when someone you love disappears forever, leaving you lost in a world that suddenly makes no sense. The boy's lips moved almost imperceptibly, his voice barely a whisper. "Mommy food, only mommy food. No other food." Emma's chest tightened with understanding. She knew that voice, the broken whisper of a child lost in grief so deep it swallowed everything else. She'd heard it in her own voice 2 years ago. Without thinking, she pushed open the cafe door. The little bell announcing her entrance. The warmth hit her like a hug she hadn't felt in months, carrying the scent of coffee and cinnamon, but she ignored the curious stares from other customers as she approached their table. Her wet shoes left small puddles on the polished floor as she walked, her chin held high despite her ragged appearance. Other patrons glanced at her with mixtures of pity and disapproval. This clearly homeless child didn't belong in their upscale establishment. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, but clear and sure. The man looked up, startled by the small, bedraggled figure standing beside their table. His first instinct was to call security, but something in her eyes stopped him. They held a wisdom far beyond her years, and a sadness that matched his own. "Your little boy. He's sad about his mommy, isn't he?" James Mitchell stared at this impossible child, dirty, clearly homeless, but speaking with the gravity of someone who understood loss. Yes, she passed away 2 months ago, and he won't eat anything. He's getting so thin, and I don't know what to do anymore. The doctors say if he doesn't start eating soon." His voice broke completely, the words too terrible to finish. Emma nodded solemnly, as if she'd expected this answer. "My mommy went away too, but I learned something really important after she left." She looked directly at Tommy, who for the first time since she'd entered, turned his head slightly toward her voice. There was something different about this girl. She didn't talk to him like the doctors who poked and prodded, or the nannies who tried to force food into his mouth. "Sometimes, when mommies go to heaven, they leave their love in the food, but daddies have to learn the magic words to make it work again." For a moment, the entire cafe seemed to hold its breath, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. James Mitchell studied the strange little girl standing beside their table, unsure whether to call security or listen to whatever impossible thing she might say next. His businessman's mind told him this was absurd, a homeless child spouting nonsense about magic, But something in Tommy's reaction stopped him cold. His son had actually looked at another person for the first time in weeks, really looked, with focus and interest instead of that terrifying blank stare. "Magic words," James whispered, afraid to break whatever spell was happening between this mysterious child and his son. Emma nodded with the seriousness of a scientist explaining a crucial discovery. She carefully climbed onto the empty chair beside Tommy, moving slowly so as not to startle him. She was so small, her feet barely hung over the edge, swinging slightly as she settled in. "My mommy taught me before she went to heaven. She said love gets cooked into food, but you have to say the special words while you make it or the love gets lost and the food becomes just. Regular food, empty food." Tommy's head tilted slightly to the right, the most movement James had seen from him in days. His son's eyes, usually so vacant, held the faintest spark of curiosity. "What kind of words?" James asked, his voice hoarse with desperate hope. He'd tried everything, child psychologists, nutritionists, even a priest who'd assured him that prayer would help. Nothing had worked. His son was slowly fading away, and James felt powerless to stop it. Emma reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn piece of paper that had been folded and refolded so many times the creases were white with wear. The edges were soft from constant handling, and James could see faded pencil marks across its surface. She held it like it was made of the most precious material on earth. "These words. My mommy wrote them down for me before the sickness took her away. She said even if I couldn't cook yet because I was too little, I should keep them safe for when I learned, or for when I met someone who needed them." She smoothed the paper carefully on the table between them. "But your little boy's mommy, she already taught you the words, didn't she, Tommy? She just taught them in a different way." Tommy's eyes moved to Emma's face for the first time, really seeing her. Mommy sing when she cook, happy songs, kitchen songs." "Yes!" Emma's face lit up with genuine joy, as if Tommy had just solved the world's most important puzzle. That's exactly how the love gets in. She was singing her love right into the food while she cooked. Every note was like a little hug going into the soup or the cookies or whatever she was making. But now, Daddy has to learn her songs, so the love can come back. James felt his throat close up with emotion. Sarah had always sung while cooking, little melodies she'd hum while chopping vegetables or stirring sauces. Made-up songs about what they were having for dinner, silly rhymes that made Tommy giggle from his high chair. He'd loved listening to her, had sometimes danced with her around the kitchen, but he'd never paid attention to learning them himself. After the cancer took her, he'd tried everything. Expensive takeout, hired chefs, pre-made meals from the best restaurants in Seattle. But Tommy refused everything that didn't come from his mother's hand. "I don't know her songs," James admitted, his voice breaking with shame and regret. "I never learned to cook. I was always working late, closing deals, building the company, and she did everything domestic. She said she loved taking care of us, so I let her. I should have learned. I should have paid attention." Emma's expression grew thoughtful, her young face serious as she considered this problem. Maybe I could help. I know some songs for cooking that my mommy taught me. And if your little boy helps choose the words and remembers his mommy's songs, maybe his mommy's love might find a way to come back through the food. Different voice, but same love." The hope blooming in James's chest was almost painful. You know how to cook? You're only... How old are you?" "8," Emma said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of experience that no 8-year-old should possess. "When you live by yourself, you have to learn fast or you don't eat. But I think Tommy's mommy was really, really good at cooking, wasn't she? I can tell by how much he misses her food." Tommy spoke again, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "Mommy make best food ever, sing happy songs, kitchen smell good, mommy laugh when flour get everywhere." James stared at this impossible child who had somehow gotten his son to speak more in 10 minutes than he had in 2 months of doctors and specialists. The next morning, Emma waited outside the towering glass building where James worked, shivering in the Seattle drizzle that seemed to seep through every layer of her inadequate clothing. She'd spent the night in a doorway 3 blocks away, curled up behind some garbage bins with her jacket pulled over her head, clutching the piece of paper with her mother's recipes and wondering if the sad man in the expensive suit would actually come back for her like he'd promised. Rich people made lots of promises, she'd learned during her 2 years on the streets. They'd see a homeless child, feel a moment of guilt or pity, offer help, then forget about it the moment they got distracted by their real lives. But something about the desperation in James Mitchell's eyes had seemed different. The way he'd looked at her when Tommy responded, like she was some kind of miracle instead of just a dirty street kid, at exactly noon, just as he'd promised. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. James Mitchell stepped out, looking around nervously, until he spotted her small figure huddled against the concrete wall of the bank building. He was wearing another expensive suit, this one navy blue, but his hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it all morning. "Emma!" He approached carefully, as if she might bolt like a frightened animal. "You came. I wasn't sure. I was afraid you might not trust me." She stood up straighter, despite her chattering teeth, trying to look brave and capable instead of small and scared. "I said I would help, Tommy. I keep my promises." Her voice was steady, but James could see the way she was trembling. Whether from cold or nerves, he couldn't tell. James noticed her blue-tinged lips and the way she was shaking, her small body clearly struggling against the November chill. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his expensive wool coat, a coat that probably cost more than most people made in a month, and wrapped it around her narrow shoulders. It hung down to her ankles like a royal robe, completely engulfing her tiny frame. "My apartment is just a few blocks away," he said gently, placing a protective hand on her shoulder as they began to walk. "Tommy's been asking about you all morning. He's with his nanny right now, Mrs. Henderson. She's been with our family since Tommy was born. She's just as worried about him as I am, maybe more." Emma clutched the coat around herself as they walked through the upscale downtown district, past boutiques and art galleries she'd only ever seen from the outside. The coat smelled like expensive cologne and success, a world completely foreign to her reality. "Does he still not eat anything?" she asked, though she already knew the answer from the haunted look that never left James's eyes. "Nothing. Yesterday, after we met you, he asked for mommy food 3 more times. But when I tried to give him anything else, even things Sarah used to make that I bought from restaurants," James's jaw tightened with frustration and helplessness. "He just sits there getting smaller every day. The pediatrician says we might have to consider a feeding tube soon if something doesn't change. I can't. I won't let it come to that." They entered a luxury apartment building with marble floors polished to mirror brightness and crystal chandeliers that threw rainbow patterns across the walls. Emma had never seen anything so beautiful, but she tried not to gawk like a tourist as they rode the elevator to the penthouse floor. She could feel the doorman's suspicious gaze following her, probably wondering why a homeless child was accompanying one of the building's most prestigious residents. The elevator climbed smoothly to the 20th floor, and when the doors opened, Emma stepped into a world that seemed like something from a movie. The apartment was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, where cargo ships looked like toys in the distance. Designer furniture in soft creams and blues filled rooms larger than the entire shelter where she'd briefly stayed. But despite all its elegance and obvious wealth, Emma could feel the sadness that hung in the air like a heavy fog, pressing down on everything beautiful and making it feel hollow. "Tommy?" James called softly as they entered. "I brought our new friend like I promised." A grey-haired woman emerged from what looked like a library, her kind face etched with deep worry lines. She was wearing a simple dress and apron, and her eyes immediately filled with maternal concern when she saw Emma's small figure swimming in James's coat. "He's in his room, Mr. Mitchell," she said quietly, her voice carrying a soft Irish accent. "He wouldn't even look at the chicken noodle soup I made, his former favorite, just pushed the bowl away and asked for mommy soup again." Her eyes grew sad as she studied Emma. "And who is this little angel?" Mrs. Henderson immediately took charge of Emma with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. "Oh, you poor dear, you're freezing. Come, let's get you warmed up properly." But Emma gently pulled back, her eyes focused on the hallway where she knew Tommy was waiting. "Can I see him first? I promised I'd help him today. And promises are really important." James led her down a hallway, lined with family photos that told the story of happier times. Emma caught glimpses of a beautiful woman with long dark hair, laughing in a sun-filled kitchen, flour dusting her hands as she baked with a much younger Tommy, the same woman holding baby Tommy in a hospital room, both of them glowing with joy, the three of them on what looked like a beach vacation, James pushing Tommy on a swing while Sarah captured the moment, her smile radiant with contentment. Each photo was a window into a world that had been perfect until cancer shattered it into pieces. Tommy's room was painted with cheerful jungle animals and filled with expensive toys that looked barely touched. The 4-year-old sat in the far corner, his back to the door, surrounded by books and puzzles that held no interest for him. His small shoulders were hunched in a way that made him look even tinier than he was. "Hi, Tommy," Emma said softly, settling cross-legged on the carpet a respectful distance away. She didn't rush toward him or try to force interaction like the well-meaning doctors had done. "I brought my mommy's special paper like I promised. Do you want to see the magic words?" Slowly, like a flower turning towards sunlight, Tommy rotated to face her. His face was noticeably thinner than yesterday, dark circles under his eyes, making him look like a tiny old man, carrying burdens too heavy for his years. Emma carefully unfolded her precious piece of paper, smoothing it on the soft carpet between them. "This one's really special. My mommy called it sunshine soup because she said it could put actual sunshine right into your heart when you're feeling dark inside." Tommy crawled closer, drawn by the mystery of the worn paper and the gentle authority in Emma's voice. "What does it say?" "Well," Emma began, pointing to the faded pencil marks, "first, you have to introduce yourself to all the ingredients. You tell the carrots how beautiful and bright they are, thank the chicken for being brave and strong, and let the celery know you appreciate how fresh and green it decided to be just for your soup." Tommy's eyes widened slightly. "You talk to food?" "Of course. Food has feelings just like people do. When someone says mean things to you, it hurts your feelings and makes you sad, right? Well, food is the same way. If you ignore it or just grab it without saying thank you, it doesn't want to help you feel better. But if you're kind and grateful, it wants to share all its good energy with you." James knelt beside them, watching this incredible interaction unfold. His business training told him this was nonsense, but Tommy was more engaged than he'd been since Sarah's death. "My mummy did that too," Tommy whispered, a ghost of excitement in his voice. "She said hello, pretty tomatoes, and thank you, strong onions when she cooked. I thought she was just being silly." "She wasn't being silly at all," Emma said seriously. "She was doing the most important part of cooking, putting love into the food. And there's something else really important." She leaned closer conspiratorially. "When you stir the soup, you have to sing songs about all the people you love. That's how the love gets mixed in with all the flavors." Tommy's small hand reached out tentatively to touch the paper. "What kind of songs?" Emma's face brightened with inspiration. "Any songs that make your heart feel warm. Songs about your mommy, songs about your daddy, songs about feeling safe and happy. The soup doesn't care if you're a good singer, it just cares that the songs come from your heart." "Mommy singed about me when she cooked," Tommy said, his voice growing stronger. "She made up songs with my name in them, silly songs that made me laugh." "Perfect. Those are exactly the right kinds of songs. Do you remember any of them?" Tommy thought hard, his brow furrowed with concentration. Then hesitantly, he began to hum a simple melody. "Tommy, Tommy, growing strong, Mommy loves you all day long." James felt tears spring to his eyes. It was Sarah's voice he was hearing, the same melody, the same rhythm she'd used during countless dinner preparations. That evening, after Mrs. Henderson had insisted on giving Emma a warm bath and finding some of Tommy's outgrown clothes that might fit her small frame, The little girl sat at the kitchen island feeling more human than she had in months. The soft pajamas smelled like fabric softener and comfort, luxuries she'd almost forgotten existed. Tommy appeared beside her, clutching a stuffed elephant that looked well loved. "Emma," he whispered, glancing toward the living room where his father was finishing a work call. "Will you sleep in my room tonight? I get really scared when it's dark, and Daddy looks sad when I wake up crying." James finished his call and approached them, overhearing the request. His first instinct was to object. This child was still essentially a stranger, after all, despite the miraculous effect she'd had on Tommy. But something in his son's voice, the first request he'd made since Sarah died, stopped the words before they could form. "Would that be okay with you, Emma?" James asked carefully. "We have guest rooms, if you'd prefer your own space." Emma shook her head immediately. "If Tommy needs me close, then that's where I should be. When I was little and scared, my mommy used to say that sometimes the best medicine is just knowing someone who cares is nearby." And they set up a cozy nest on the floor of Tommy's room, using the softest blankets Mrs. Henderson could find, along with pillows that felt like clouds. As they settled in for the night, Tommy spoke from his race car bed, his voice small in the darkness. "Emma, my mommy used to sing me to sleep every night. She said the songs would keep the scary dreams away and fill my head with happy thoughts instead. Do you know any sleep songs?" Emma thought for a moment, then began to hum softly, a melody her own mother had sung during those final weeks in the hospital, when pain medication couldn't chase away all the fear. The tune was simple, but achingly beautiful, filled with love and comfort and the promise that tomorrow could be better than today. "Sunshine in your dreams, little one," she sang quietly, her young voice pure and sweet in the darkness. "Moonbeams keep you safe till morning comes. Angels watch you sleeping, love surrounds you deep, until the sunrise wakes you from your peaceful sleep." From the doorway, James listened with tears streaming down his face. It wasn't exactly the same melody Sarah used to sing, but it was close. So close, it felt like his wife's spirit was somehow present in this remarkable child's voice. The tune carried the same gentle rhythm Sarah had hummed while rocking Tommy as a baby, while cooking dinner, while fighting cancer with grace and courage in those final months. "How do you know that song?" he whispered, stepping into the room. Emma's voice was drowsy but certain. "All mommies know it somehow. Mine taught it to me when I was really little, before I even understood what the words meant. Tommy's mommy probably sang it too, maybe with different words but the same heart. It's the song that connects all the love in the world, the one that reminds us we're never really alone." For the first time in 2 months, Tommy fell asleep without crying, his breathing deep and peaceful as the melody wrapped around him like a lullaby blanket. James stood in the hallway long after both children were breathing deeply, feeling something he'd thought was lost forever, beginning to stir in his heart. This little girl, this brave, impossible child who'd appeared in their lives like an answer to prayers he'd been afraid to voice, had brought music back into their silent house in just 2 days. In the morning, he decided, they would cook together. Emma would teach them to channel Sarah's love through different hands and a different voice, and maybe, somehow, they could all learn to live again instead of just surviving. But as he finally headed to his own empty bedroom, James couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Emma's story than she'd shared. The way she'd known that melody, the wisdom in her 8-year-old eyes, the coincidence of finding them at exactly the moment they needed her most. It felt like more than chance. It felt like destiny, like Sarah herself had somehow sent this child to save the family she'd had to leave behind. The next morning, Emma woke to find Tommy sitting by the large window in his room, staring out at the Seattle skyline with more alertness and focus than he'd shown in weeks. The morning light caught the gold flecks in his brown eyes that looked so much like his mother's in the photographs lining the hallway. When he saw her stirring from her nest of blankets, he actually smiled, a small, tentative expression that transformed his entire face and made her heart soar with hope. "Good morning, Tommy. Did you sleep better last night?" He nodded eagerly, then paused, his expression growing thoughtful. "Emma, last night I had the most wonderful dream about Mommy. She was in our old kitchen. The one we had before we moved to this big apartment, and she was cooking and singing just like she used to. She looked so happy and healthy, not sick like at the end." Emma sat up, immediately interested. Dreams about lost parents were sacred things, not to be dismissed or minimized. "What did she say in the dream?" she said. Tommy's voice grew quiet with wonder. "She said you were going to teach Daddy her songs, but in a different way. She said sometimes love has to find new voices to keep going, and that she picked you special to help us remember how to be happy again." Emma felt goosebumps rise along her arms. "That sounds like a very important dream, Tommy. I think your mommy was telling you something real." James appeared in the doorway, already dressed for what should have been another day at the office, but carrying a cup of coffee and looking more rested than he had in months. Dark circles still shadowed his eyes, but there was something different about his posture, less defeated, more hopeful. "Actually," he announced, "I called my office early this morning and cleared my entire schedule. I'm taking the day off. I want to learn how to make this sunshine soup, and I want to learn the right way, with songs and gratitude and all the special words Emma's mother wrote down." An hour later, the three of them stood in the pristine kitchen that Sarah had designed with such love and care, but that James had barely used since her death. The granite countertops gleamed under pendant lights, and every appliance was top of the line, but the room had felt cold and lifeless for months, until now. Emma had carefully laid out her mother's recipe paper on the counter, its worn edges and faded pencil marks looking humble but precious against the expensive surface. Mrs. Henderson had gathered all the necessary ingredients, arranging them like an artist's palette. Bright orange carrots, crisp celery stalks, a whole chicken that looked farm fresh, herbs that filled the air with earthy promise. "Now remember," Emma explained with the seriousness of a master chef instructing students, "cooking isn't just about following directions. It's about making friends with your food and inviting love into every single step. Tommy, pick up a carrot and tell it something nice, something that comes from your heart." Tommy giggled, the first genuine laughter James had heard from him since Sarah's death, a sound so beautiful it made his chest ache with relief. "Hello, carrot. You're very orange and pretty, and I bet you grew really hard to be so perfect for our soup." Wonderful. Now, Daddy, you try with the celery. Don't think too much about it, just say what feels right." James felt absolutely ridiculous talking to vegetables, but the hope shining in his son's eyes made him willing to try anything. Hello, celery. Thank you for being so fresh and green and for growing in the sunshine so you could help us make something special today." Emma nodded approvingly. "Perfect. You're both naturals at this. Now we start the actual cooking, but here's the most important part. Tommy, can you remember any of the songs your mommy used to sing while she cooked? Even just humming the tunes would be perfect." Tommy closed his eyes, concentrating hard. Then he began to hum hesitantly, his small voice carrying a melody that made James's breath catch. It was the same tune Emma had sung the night before, but with Sarah's rhythm, Sarah's pauses, Sarah's joy woven through every note. Slowly, words began to emerge. Stirring, stirring, love goes in. Warm my baby from within, carrots dancing, celery too, making soup for me and you. James's breath caught completely. It was exactly how Sarah used to sing while cooking their Sunday dinners, her voice filling the kitchen with warmth and contentment. "That's it." Emma clapped her hands in delight. "That's your mommy's love song. Now we all sing together while we cook, and the soup will taste like love because we're putting love into making it." As they chopped and stirred and sang together, something truly magical began to happen. The kitchen filled with warmth that had nothing to do with the stove's heat. Tommy helped measure ingredients with careful precision. James sang off-key but with his whole heart, and Emma conducted them like a tiny orchestra conductor, keeping them all in harmony. When the soup was finally ready, filling the kitchen with an aroma that smelled like comfort and home, Tommy took his first voluntary bite of food in 2 months. His eyes widened with surprise and joy. "It tastes like Mommy's love," he whispered in wonder, and then promptly ate an entire bowl without stopping. James was so overcome with relief and gratitude that he had to sit down, his hands shaking as the weight of 2 months' worry finally began to lift from his shoulders. "Emma, I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given me my son back. You've saved our family." But even as the words left his mouth, his phone rang with an intrusive electronic chirp. Mrs. Henderson answered it in the next room, and James could hear her voice growing concerned, then alarmed. She returned to the kitchen with a deeply troubled expression, her face pale with worry. "Mr. Mitchell, that was someone from Child Protective Services. They're conducting an active search for a missing child. An 8-year-old girl named Emma who disappeared from foster care 3 weeks ago. They're asking all the hospitals, shelters and community centers to keep an eye out. They said she's considered at risk, and they're very worried about her safety." Emma went completely still, her spoon halfway to her mouth, her face suddenly guarded. James looked from Mrs. Henderson to Emma, his mind racing with implications and questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. "Emma, is there something you need to tell us?" Emma set down her spoon with trembling hands, her eyes darting between James and Mrs. Henderson like a cornered animal calculating escape routes. The warmth that had filled the kitchen moments before suddenly felt suffocating, and the beautiful apartment that had seemed like a sanctuary now felt like a trap. "I didn't mean to lie," she whispered, her voice so small it was barely audible. I couldn't go back there, not to that place." Her shoulders began to shake, and tears she'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. "The foster home was supposed to be temporary, just until they found me a real family. But there were so many kids and never enough food. And the man who ran it," she wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking even smaller than her 8 years. "He said things, did things, made some of the older girls do things they didn't want to do. When I tried to tell the social worker, she said I was making up stories for attention. She said problem children always blame others for their situations." James felt rage building in his chest, not at Emma, but at a system that had failed this remarkable child so completely. "Emma, you're safe here. We won't let anyone hurt you." "But they'll make me go back," Emma said, her voice breaking completely. "They always make kids go back. And if they find out I ran away, they'll send me somewhere worse. They said if I caused any more trouble, I'd end up in juvenile detention until I turned 18. Tommy, who had been listening with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up with more determination than James had heard from him since Sarah's death. "Daddy, we can't let them take Emma away. She saved me. She brought Mommy's songs back. We have to protect her now." Mrs. Henderson, who had raised 3 children of her own and understood the complexities of the system, spoke carefully. "Mr. Mitchell, there are legal procedures we need to follow, but perhaps we could explore other options. Emma clearly needs a stable home, and she's done more for Tommy in 3 days than months of therapy achieved." James's mind raced through possibilities. His wealth and connections could open doors, but Emma's situation was complicated. She wasn't just a runaway. She was a ward of the state, with a documented history of behavioral problems, according to her file. "Emma," he said gently, kneeling to her eye level, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to call my attorney, the best family lawyer in Seattle. We're going to figure out a way to keep you safe and keep you here, if that's what you want. But I need you to trust me and be completely honest about everything that happened." Emma looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception or false promises. She'd learned not to trust adults easily. But something in James's expression reminded her of her own father before grief had broken him. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about why I was really at that coffee shop when I found you and Tommy." James waited patiently, sensing this was important. "I wasn't just looking for food, I was looking for him, for Tommy. She pulled a newspaper clipping from her jacket pocket, worn from handling. It was an article about Sarah Mitchell's death, including a photo of the family. "I saw this article 3 weeks ago when someone left a newspaper on a park bench. When I read about how Tommy stopped eating after his mommy died, I knew I had to find him." Mrs. Henderson gasped softly. "You've been looking for us specifically?" Emma nodded. "My mommy always said her recipes were meant to be shared with children who needed them. When I read about Tommy, I felt like my mommy was telling me he was the one I was supposed to help. I've been watching your building for days, waiting for the right moment." James stared at this extraordinary child who had orchestrated their meeting with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. "Emma, that's incredible. But how did you know we'd be at that specific coffee shop?" "I followed you from your building that morning. I could see how sad you both were, and I knew Tommy wasn't eating by how thin he looked. When you went into the cafe, I could tell through the window that you were both crying. That's when I knew it was time." The phone rang again, piercing the emotional moment. Mrs. Henderson answered with a worried expression, then covered the receiver. "It's Child Protective Services again. They want to speak with you directly, Mr. Mitchell. They said they have reason to believe Emma might be in this area." Emma's face went white with terror. "They found me. They're going to take me away." James stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Not if I have anything to say about it." James took the phone with the confidence of a man accustomed to high-stakes negotiations, but his protective instincts toward Emma made his voice sharp with barely controlled anger. "This is James Mitchell," he said curtly into the receiver. "Mr. Mitchell, this is Sandra Williams from Child Protective Services. We're conducting a search for a missing child, and we have reports that you may have had contact with her. 8-year-old Emma Patterson, brown hair, small for her age, missing from foster care for 3 weeks." James looked at Emma, who was pressed against Tommy's side, both children clinging to each other with desperate fear. "And what makes you think I would have information about this child? We've been canvassing the upscale neighborhoods where a homeless child might seek help. Your building's doorman mentioned seeing you with a young girl yesterday. We need to speak with you immediately." "I see. And what exactly happened to this child while she was in your care that made her feel running away was safer than staying in the system?" There was a pause. "Mr. Mitchell, I don't appreciate your tone. We're trying to locate a vulnerable child who could be in danger on the streets. If you have any information—" "Ms. Williams," James interrupted, his voice taking on the commanding tone he used in boardrooms, "I'm going to stop you right there. Before we continue this conversation, I want you to know that I'm recording this call, and my attorney will be present for any further discussions. If you want to continue, you can call back in 2 hours." He hung up without waiting for a response. Emma stared at him with amazement. You hung up on them. Won't that make them more suspicious?" "Probably," James admitted, "but it will also give us time to get proper legal representation. Emma, I need you to tell me everything about the foster home, names, addresses, specific incidents. My lawyer needs to know exactly what we're dealing with." Over the next hour, Emma reluctantly shared details that made James's blood boil. The foster father, Robert Hendricks, ran what was essentially a profit center disguised as childcare. 23 children crammed into a house meant for a family of 4. Minimal food, no supervision, and inappropriate behavior that the overwhelmed social workers either didn't see or chose to ignore. "The worst part," Emma said quietly, "was watching the little ones cry for their real families while nobody cared enough to comfort them. Some of those kids had been there for years, just forgotten." Mrs. Henderson wiped tears from her eyes. "That's no way for any child to live." Tommy, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "Daddy, if Emma has to go back there, couldn't we adopt her, like people adopt puppies from the shelter?" The innocence of the question hit James like a physical blow. "It's more complicated than that, son, but—" He looked at Emma, who was staring at him with cautious hope. "But maybe not impossible." James's phone buzzed with a text from his attorney, confirming he'd be there within the hour. But before he could respond, the building's intercom crackled to life. "Mr. Mitchell," the doorman's voice came through, tense with anxiety. "There are 2 people here from Child Protective Services. They say they need to speak with you immediately about an urgent matter involving a missing child." Emma bolted upright, terror written across her face. "They're here. They're going to take me away right now." James moved to the intercom. "Tell them my attorney will be here shortly, and they can wait in the lobby until then." "Sir, they're saying they have a court order for immediate removal of any minor children found on the premises who match the description of the missing child." Emma was now crying openly, clinging to Tommy, who was also beginning to panic. "Please don't let them take me. Please. I'll be good. I'll do anything you want. Just don't make me go back there." James felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Tommy was born, when Sarah was diagnosed, when his family needed him to be strong. "Emma, listen to me. I promise you, I will not let them take you back to a place where you're not safe. Do you trust me?" Through her tears, Emma nodded. "Good. Mrs. Henderson, take both children to Tommy's room and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me. Emma, remember what you told Tommy about his mother's love staying in the food? Well, sometimes grown-ups have to be brave to protect the people they love. That's what I'm going to do right now." As Mrs. Henderson guided the children away, James straightened his tie and prepared for the most important negotiation of his life. But just as he reached for the intercom to let the social workers up, his phone rang with a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end made his blood run cold. "Is this James Mitchell? This is Detective Ray Martinez with Seattle PD. We need to talk to you immediately about Emma Patterson. We have new information about her case that changes everything." James gripped the phone tighter, his heart pounding. "Detective Martinez, I'm listening. Mr. Mitchell, we've just arrested Robert Hendricks, the foster parent responsible for Emma Patterson. We have evidence of systematic abuse and neglect involving multiple children in his care. Emma wasn't just running away. She was fleeing a dangerous situation that we're now treating as a criminal matter." Relief and fury warred in James's chest. "What kind of evidence?" "I can't give you all the details over the phone, but we have testimony from several other children, financial records showing fraud, and physical evidence of inappropriate conduct. Emma's allegations, which were dismissed by her caseworker, are now central to our investigation. We need to speak with her, but as a witness, not a runaway." James heard the intercom buzz again. The social workers downstairs were getting impatient. "Detective, there are CPS workers here right now trying to take her back into the system. What are my options?" "Don't let them take her anywhere until I get there. Emma is a key witness in an active criminal investigation, and her safety is our primary concern. I'm 10 minutes away." James immediately called to Mrs. Henderson. "Change of plans. Keep the children where they are, but we may have some good news coming." He pressed the intercom button. "This is James Mitchell. I understand you're here about Emma Patterson. However, I've just been contacted by Seattle Police Detective Martinez regarding this case. The child is now considered a protected witness in a criminal investigation. You'll need to coordinate with the detective before taking any action." There was a long pause. "Mr. Mitchell, we have our orders, and I have mine from the Seattle Police Department. Detective Martinez will be here in 10 minutes to explain the situation. You're welcome to wait in the lobby." James hung up and went to Tommy's room, where he found Emma teaching Tommy a clapping game to distract him from the stress. Her resilience amazed him. Even in her moment of greatest fear, she was taking care of his son. "Emma," he said gently, "I have some news. The police have arrested the man who was hurting you and the other children at the foster home. You're not in trouble. You're a hero for speaking up about what was happening." Emma's eyes widened. "They arrested Mr. Hendricks. Really? Really? And Detective Martinez wants to talk to you, but as someone who helped solve a crime, not as someone who did anything wrong." For the first time since the phone calls began, Emma smiled. "Does that mean I don't have to go back there?" "It means we have options now," legal options. And Emma, there's something I want to ask you, but I want you to think about it carefully. Tommy bounced up excitedly. Are you going to ask her what I think you're going to ask her? James knelt down, so he was at eye level with both children. Emma, these past few days, you've become part of our family. You saved Tommy, you brought music back to our home, and you've shown more courage and wisdom than many adults I know. I know this is all happening very fast, but how would you feel about staying with us? Not just for a few days, but permanently? Emma stared at him in shock. You mean, like a real family? Forever? Like a real family. Forever. I'll need to file adoption papers, and there will be legal processes to follow. But my attorney thinks we have a strong case, especially with the criminal charges against your former foster placement. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they were tears of joy. You really want me, even though I'm just a street kid with nothing to offer. James felt his own eyes getting misty. Emma, you saved my son's life. You brought love back into our home when I thought it was gone forever. You have everything to offer. Tommy jumped up and down. Say yes, Emma, say yes. We can be brother and sister. And you can teach me more cooking songs, and we can take care of Daddy together. Just then, the doorbell rang. James checked the security monitor. A man in a detective's badge stood outside, along with the two social workers who looked significantly less confident than they had earlier. That's Detective Martinez. Emma, are you ready to tell your story to someone who will actually listen and believe you? Emma squared her small shoulders with determination. I'm ready. And Mr. James, thank you for being the first grown-up who wanted to protect me instead of control me. As James opened the door to let the detective in, he couldn't help but think about Sarah and how proud she would be of the family they were building. Emma had come into their lives like an answer to prayers, but maybe, just maybe, they were the answer to hers as well. Detective Martinez was a kind-faced man in his 40s who immediately put Emma at ease. Hello, Emma. I've heard you're a very brave girl who helped us discover some important information about children who needed protection. But as the detective began to explain the situation to the social workers, his phone rang. His expression grew serious as he listened. Then he looked directly at James with an expression of surprise and concern. Mr. Mitchell, that was my partner. We've discovered something unexpected about Emma's background that you need to know immediately. Detective Martinez looked directly at Emma with gentle but serious eyes. Emma, we've been investigating your case, and we discovered something about your family history that changes everything. Your father, the one you thought abandoned you after your mother died, he didn't just disappear because he couldn't cope with grief. Emma's face went pale. What do you mean? 3 months after your mother passed away, your father was in a serious car accident. He's been in a specialized care facility in Portland, recovering from a traumatic brain injury. He's been asking about you every day since he regained consciousness 6 months ago, but the hospital and social services lost track of your location when you entered foster care. The room fell completely silent. James felt the ground shift beneath him as he realized what this meant. My daddy is alive. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Not only alive, but fighting every day to get well enough to take care of you again. The doctors say he's made remarkable progress. His speech has returned, his memory is improving, and his motor functions are nearly back to normal. He's been working with social workers trying to locate you. Emma began to shake. He wants me back? Emma, your father never stopped wanting you. When he woke up and learned you'd been placed in foster care, he started rehabilitation therapy with a determination the doctors had never seen. He's been working 2 jobs from his hospital bed, physical therapy to get his body back, and legal advocacy to get his daughter back. James felt his heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. This was wonderful news for Emma, but it meant losing her just when she'd become part of their family. There's more, Detective Martinez continued. Your father has been following news stories about Tommy's situation. When he saw the article about a boy who wouldn't eat after losing his mother, He told his social worker that it sounded like something his Emma would want to help with. He's been praying you would find your way to a family that needed your special gift with cooking and caring for people. Emma looked confused. He knew about Tommy? He didn't know specifically, but he knew you. He told everyone at the hospital that his daughter had a gift for helping sad children feel better, that your mother had taught you special ways to cook with love. He said if you were out there somewhere, you'd find someone who needed that gift. Tommy, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. Emma, your daddy sounds really nice and really smart. James struggled with conflicting emotions. He'd fallen in love with the idea of Emma as his daughter, but how could he stand in the way of a father who had fought so hard to recover and reclaim his child? When can I see him? Emma asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. We can arrange a video call today, and if you're both comfortable, we can arrange a visit tomorrow. But Emma, there's something important you need to understand. Your father knows that you've been through trauma, and he wants whatever is best for you, even if that means taking time to rebuild your relationship. Emma looked at James with tears in her eyes. Mr. James, I'm so confused. I want to see my daddy, but I don't want to leave you and Tommy. You saved me too. James knelt down and took her hands. Emma, the most important thing is that you get to choose what feels right for you. No one is going to force you into anything. Maybe there's a way for all of us to be in your life. Detective Martinez smiled. Actually, that's exactly what your father was hoping. He asked if the family that had been taking care of you might be willing to meet him. He said he wanted to thank them personally for protecting his daughter when he couldn't. Mrs. Henderson, who had been wiping tears throughout the conversation, spoke up. This child has brought so much healing to this household. If her father is half as special as she is, I think we're about to witness something beautiful. Tommy tugged on Emma's sleeve. Emma, maybe your daddy can come have dinner with us. You can make sunshine soup for everyone, and we can teach him the songs, and he can tell us stories about when you were little. Emma looked around at all the faces surrounding her, people who had shown her more love and protection in 4 days than she'd experienced in 2 years on her own. Can we really do that? Can my daddy meet my new family? Detective Martinez nodded. Emma, your father's first words when he woke up were, "Where is my Emma? And who is taking care of her?" I think he's going to be very grateful to meet the people who answered that question. But just as Emma was beginning to smile, Detective Martinez's radio crackled with an urgent message that made his expression change dramatically. Detective Martinez, we need you back at the station immediately. There's been a development in the Hendricks case that requires Emma's immediate attention. We've discovered something about the other children that changes the entire scope of the investigation. Detective Martinez's expression grew grave as he listened to the message. Emma, we need to talk about something important. The other children from the foster home. We've discovered that several of them have no family to return to, and they're going to need safe places to stay while we sort out their situations. Emma's eyes widened with understanding. The little ones? The ones who cried at night? Yes. There's a 5-year-old named Marcus who's been asking for you specifically. He told our child psychologist that you used to sing to him when he had nightmares and that you shared your food with him when there wasn't enough. He's scared and doesn't trust any of the adults trying to help him. James felt something shift in his chest. How many children are we talking about? 7 children who are now in emergency placement, but 3 of them, Marcus, his 6-year-old sister Lily, and a 4-year-old named Carlos, are having severe emotional reactions. They're not eating, not speaking, showing signs of trauma that our usual foster families aren't equipped to handle. Emma stood up straighter, her voice filled with determination. They need the cooking songs. They need someone who understands what it feels like to be scared and alone. Tommy looked up at his father with the innocent wisdom that had become familiar. Daddy, remember when Emma helped me? Maybe she could help them too. Maybe we could help them too. James looked around the room, at Emma, whose eyes were bright with purpose, at Tommy, who was more alive than he'd been in months, at Mrs. Henderson, who was nodding encouragingly, at Detective Martinez, who was watching this conversation with interest. Detective, what would be required if we wanted to help these children? Not permanently, necessarily, but as emergency placement while they heal. Mr. Mitchell, you'd need to apply for emergency foster certification, which, given your background check and financial stability, could be expedited. But are you sure you're prepared for that level of responsibility? These children have been through severe trauma. Emma looked at James with hope and determination. Mr. James, I know how to help scared kids. My mummy taught me, and I learned more on the streets. Food and songs and feeling safe, that's what they need most. James thought about his enormous apartment, his resources, his ability to hire additional help. But more than that, he thought about the transformation he'd witnessed in his own son, and the light that had returned to their home through Emma's presence. Mrs. Henderson, what do you think? Could we manage 3 more children temporarily? Mrs. Henderson straightened up with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades caring for others. Mr. Mitchell, this apartment is large enough for a small army, and I've raised children through worse situations than this. If Emma is willing to help, and if these little ones need us, then we have a duty to step up. Tommy was practically bouncing with excitement. We could be like a big family. Emma could teach everyone the cooking songs, and I could share my toys, and maybe they could help me build the big puzzle I've been too sad to finish. Detective Martinez looked impressed. This is highly unusual, but given the circumstances and Emma's relationship with these children, it might be exactly what they need. However, there's one more thing you should know. He paused, checking his notes. Emma's father has been following this case from his hospital bed. When he learned about the other children's situation, he asked if he could help too. He's a construction supervisor, was before his accident, and he's offered to do repairs and improvements on any facility that takes in these children. He wants to contribute to their care, even while he's still recovering. Emma's eyes filled with tears. My daddy wants to help the other kids too. Your father said, and I quote, My Emma has a gift for healing broken hearts. If she's found people who understand that gift, then I want to support whatever family has supported her. James felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. In 4 days, his family had grown from 2 broken people to potentially 6 children who needed love and healing. Detective, when can we meet Emma's father, and when can we meet these children? I can arrange the video call with Emma's father this afternoon, and if everyone agrees, we could have the children here by evening. But Mr. Mitchell, I need you to understand, this isn't just about providing a temporary home. These children will need therapy, medical care, educational support, and more patience than you can imagine. Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. When she turned back to the room, her expression was filled with quiet determination. Mr. James, Tommy, Mrs. Henderson, you saved me when I thought no one cared if I lived or died. Now we have a chance to save other kids who feel the same way I did. If my daddy approves, and if you're willing, I think we should try. James looked at his son, who was nodding eagerly, then at Mrs. Henderson, who was already mentally calculating sleeping arrangements and meal plans. All right then. Let's do this. Let's build the family that all these children deserve. But as Detective Martinez reached for his phone to begin making arrangements, it rang with an incoming call that made his face turn serious. Detective Martinez, what? Are you sure? We'll be right there. He hung up and looked at the group with concern. That was the hospital in Portland. Emma's father has just made an unexpected decision that's going to change all of our plans. Detective Martinez's phone call had left everyone in the room holding their breath. Emma gripped Tommy's hand tightly, her face pale with worry. What kind of decision? Emma whispered. Your father has just checked himself out of the hospital against medical advice. He's driving to Seattle right now. He said he couldn't wait another day to see his daughter, and when he learned about the other children who needed help, he decided he was strong enough to be part of the solution immediately. Emma's eyes widened. He's coming here, today. He should arrive within the next 2 hours. But Emma, there's something else. He's not coming alone. James felt his chest tighten. What do you mean? Emma's father has been working with a non-profit organization that specializes in trauma recovery for children. He's bringing Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who has experience with exactly the kind of situation these foster children are facing. He wants to make sure every child gets the help they need. Emma sat down heavily, overwhelmed by the rapid developments. My daddy, he's really coming, and he's bringing help for the other kids. Detective Martinez smiled. Emma, your father has spent 6 months in recovery thinking about nothing but getting back to you and making sure you're safe and happy. When he learned you'd been helping other children who went through trauma like yours, he said it was exactly what your mother would have wanted you to do. Tommy looked confused. Emma, are you happy or scared? Oh, both, Emma admitted. I've dreamed about seeing my daddy again every night for 2 years. But what if I'm different now? What if he doesn't like who I've become? Mrs. Henderson moved to sit beside Emma, her voice gentle but firm. Child, love doesn't work that way. Your father isn't coming to judge who you've become. He's coming to celebrate that you survived and found your way to people who cherish you. James knelt in front of Emma. Emma, no matter what happens with your father, you will always be part of our family now. You've changed our lives forever, and that bond doesn't disappear just because your situation changes. An hour later, James's apartment had been transformed into a preparation zone. Mrs. Henderson was cooking enough food for a small army. Tommy was arranging his toys in the living room so the other children would feel welcome. And Emma was carefully writing out copies of her mother's recipes so each child could have their own set of magic words. When the intercom buzzed, Emma froze completely. Emma, James said gently, are you ready? She nodded, though her hands were shaking. Tommy took one of her hands, and James took the other as they walked to the door. When James opened it, they saw Detective Martinez, accompanied by a man who looked like an older version of Emma. The same warm brown eyes, the same determined chin, but with graying hair, and the careful movements of someone still recovering from serious injury. Beside him stood an Asian woman with kind eyes carrying a medical bag. Emma, the man said, his voice breaking with emotion. Daddy, Emma whispered. David Patterson dropped to his knees and Emma ran into his arms. They held each other and cried for several minutes while everyone else in the room wiped away their own tears. My brave girl, David whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm so sorry you had to be strong all by yourself. I wasn't by myself, Daddy. I found Tommy and Mr. James and Mrs. Henderson, and they took care of me. And now we're going to take care of other kids who need help. David looked up at James with tears in his eyes. Mr. Mitchell, I will never be able to repay you for protecting my daughter when I couldn't. James helped them both stand. David, your daughter saved my family. She brought my son back to life and taught us how to love again. We're the ones who should be thanking you for raising such an extraordinary child. Dr. Chen stepped forward. I hate to interrupt this beautiful reunion, but we have 3 very scared children waiting downstairs who need to see that Emma is safe and happy before they'll trust any of us. Emma wiped her eyes and stood straighter. They're here, Marcus and Lily and Carlos. They're in the lobby with a social worker. Marcus hasn't spoken since yesterday. But when he heard Emma's name, he perked up for the first time. Emma looked around the room at her father, at James and Tommy, at Mrs. Henderson and at Dr. Chen. Are we really going to do this? Are we really going to be one big family that takes care of each other? And David Patterson smiled, the first real smile he'd had since his wife died 3 years ago. Emma, your mother always said that families aren't just about blood. They're about people who choose to love and protect each other. I think she'd be very proud of the family you've built. James nodded. We're going to need more bedrooms, more high chairs, probably more patience than any of us knew we had. But yes, Emma, we're going to do this together. Tommy tugged on Emma's sleeve. Emma, can we go get the little kids now? I want to show them the kitchen where we make the singing soup. Emma looked at her father. "Daddy, are you strong enough for this?" David Patterson stood up straighter, his eyes clear and determined. "Emma, for the past 6 months, the only thing that kept me fighting to get better was the thought of taking care of you again. Now I find out you've been taking care of others who needed you. I've never been more ready for anything in my life." And so, 20 minutes later, the penthouse apartment that had been silent with grief just a week before was filled with the voices of 6 children, 3 adults who had committed to loving them, and Dr. Chen, who was already planning therapy sessions that would help heal young hearts. As Emma stood in the kitchen, teaching 5-year-old Marcus how to say hello to carrots, while Tommy helped 6-year-old Lily measure ingredients, and 4-year-old Carlos giggled at Mrs. Henderson's funny faces, James realized that sometimes the most broken families become the strongest ones. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. "Adoption papers are ready for all children when you are. Family court judge says she's never seen a more compelling case for emergency family formation." James looked around his kitchen, now filled with children's laughter and the smell of sunshine soup, and thought about Sarah. She would have loved this chaos, this beautiful noise, this house full of children who needed love and had found it in the most unexpected way. Emma caught his eye and smiled, the radiant smile of a child who had learned that sometimes when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself too. Outside, snow began to fall gently on Seattle, covering the city in a blanket of new beginnings.